Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the AME Food Testing Show. Today's guest is Karl Kolb, Ph.D., president of the High Sierra Chemical Company of Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, which provides specialty chemical products for the food industry. Today's topic is, how is an environmental alert a precursor to a contamination event? The High Sierra Group is a composite of companies offering a wide range of accredited and acclaimed services to the food industry. It is a group of companies that are focused on the return of your hard-earned investment. They are registered, accredited, and accepted throughout the industry and have built a business on a long-standing reputation of hard work and tangible results. Now, please welcome Dr. Karl Kolb. Karl?
Good evening, Andy. Thanks for having me back on.
Well, thank you for joining us again on this timely topic. Would you like to add anything to your introduction tonight?
No, you did a fine job. I'm very proud of the High Sierra Group. We have 50 or more dedicated professionals who really work very hard to make sure that the customer has a good return on their investment. And we do this through personalized service, one-on-one. We have a couple tenets in the company we think are important. One is we don't have an answering machine. You get a live person when you call. Number two, we return your call the same day with an answer, or how soon we'll have an answer. And thirdly, sometimes we don't think the customer's always right, so we'll tell the truth. We're not into gaining more business. We're into giving you real and honest answers to questions, and that's who we are.
Excellent. Well, today's topic is actually a repeat of a previous program that we conducted, but today's format will allow for questions to be phoned in, and today's question of the day is, what is an environmental alert? Dr. Kolb?
Well, an environmental alert is an indication from an environmental program that's been set up through a risk analysis that something within the plant is not performing properly. An alert has come from a swab that has been taken on equipment or floors, drains, walls, ceilings, other locations on equipment where people may or may not clean well, that something isn't working right. We have high stress on the plant from abnormal levels of bacteria from perhaps incoming product, or we have something about our good hygiene program that isn't working properly, or our sanitation program that may have issues with regard to how they're applying their chemicals or ways in which they're cleaning, which need to be examined. And this alert is important because I believe that if your environmental program is set up according to a risk analysis, and I'll discuss that in a little bit, that you should have an alert 7 days prior to a contamination event. In other words, before someone gets sick, before you ship contaminated product, before you have some sort of risk presented to the public that will cause issues, and something that we can catch if we do the risk analysis properly.
That's an excellent assertion. And the reason I'm asking that is, why does an environmental positive test alert management that there's something going on in the plant?
Well, I don't think there's been enough attention put on environmental testing. There's big concerns, especially with the downturn in the economy, of tightening budgets and focusing on just truly what's important. And so you find when people look at their prerequisite programs, they're looking at the cost of these programs, and they tend to, I think, take money out of the budget where they should be putting money into the budget. Environmental testing is one of those areas where inspectors really don't know what to look for. A lot of people haven't been well-versed on their own or through school on environmental testing. And so I find a lot that people are doing 1 or 2 samples a month or 1 or 2 samples a week, when really, based on the plant, the equipment, the commodity, how many people are in the plant, what are the traffic areas of the plant. Then in many cases, 40 or more samples a week should be taken. Now, there's a high cost associated with this, but if you think and remember back that a contamination event, when found through environmental testing, is very easily a 5 to 7 to 10 day advance notice that something's going to go wrong with the food. In other words, you're going to pass that contamination along from the drain or the surface of the product, surface of the equipment, onto the product and out to the public. And so a tremendous amount of attention, I think, needs to be placed on environmental testing. I think to a similar degree, there needs to be some sort of 100% confidence level in your finished product, that it's clean, through PCR testing perhaps, and then of course through good instruction, good training of your good hygiene practices to make sure that people are doing the right thing. And I think through those three things alone, you can reach confidence levels exceeding 95% that you're shipping good product. And if you get an alert, then you know that you've discovered something is not right in the system, and you can correct it before it moves to the public arena, where obviously people get hurt and your reputation is at risk, and a lot of money is ill spent, unfortunately, when you could have spent that right up front by taking the proper precautions.
Well, Dr. Kolb, you raised two issues. One, the frequency of the testing and locations, and then the cost. Can you review again for our audience of food production professionals, food safety, food quality, and food security officers, what are some of the highlighted areas in a plant to screen for environmental surfaces?
Well, very good question, because it all surrounds a risk analysis. And if you look at where contamination can come into the building, the product receiving area, areas that are trafficked by employees, these are the two principal areas where bacteria can come into the plant. And when you think about the three primary bacteria, E. coli 0157, Listeria monocytogenes, and Salmonella, each one has a different characteristic. So when you set up your risk analysis, you want to look at where those three tend to hide, where you have the areas that they can move easily by foot or by a forklift, tire, or through some other means. And then you need to look and say, where now can they be? How fast do they move? So you want to look at where the pressure is coming in. You want to look at the type of bacteria that you're going to experience in a plant, and then you want to look at how does it move throughout the plant, where can it be found. And when you do a risk analysis properly, you want to look at the floors, you want to look at drapes, you want to look at drains, you want to look at walls and doors, you want to look at equipment, where people put their hands, where they stand, where they walk. Setting up a scatter program that carpets the entire plant in such a fashion that you set up indicators throughout the plant where those probable areas are located. And once you've built a database, you can go back and you can reduce that amount of testing, but you're still going to have the testing occurring in those areas where you suspect that you're going to find the bacteria. Now, after a given time, you're going to want to change that, because bacteria is very smart. I find a number of pathogens really think a lot like we do, and in a sense that there's this fight or flight mentality, because Listeria moves much like a ping pong ball throughout the plant. If you clean it up in one area, it seems to know it needs to move. With E. coli, it tends to spread a lot across the equipment by hands. It's on belts. It's places where people have failed to clean, and the bacteria seems to know that, and it grows well in those areas. And then also, I find that Salmonella has a tendency to move through the air. So knowing some of the characteristics of your plant, how the blowers work, where they blow air, where there's trafficability issues, where you find drains and such, that's where you're going to set up a scatter diagram according to those areas, and that's where you want to do your carpet effect over the entire plant to say what is the health of my plant, and then reduce that to those critical areas so that you get the alerts in time to say, this is a sanitation issue, I can fix that, or this is a hygiene issue, I can fix that, or this is a high bacteria count on this product at this time of the year, and I can fix that. So your ability to go in and do a risk analysis and set up a program that's consistent, is strategic, it has variables that change how you test, is critical. And this, once again, is the best indication you have of an impending issue with regard to contamination. And if you think about what can happen as a result of a contamination issue, getting people sick, you don't have any trouble putting money where it's important. And an environmental program is one of those areas where I would not want to skip any money whatsoever. And it is expensive to do. It is time-consuming. But it's the best indicator you have of an impending contamination issue.
Excellent. The investment you're proposing is in the order of how much for each test, and if we're looking at 40 tests a week, is that 160 tests a month, and then we calculate that out for the year? Is that what you're proposing?
Well, that's exactly right, but there's some tests you can take and consolidate the results and do one test, for instance, PCR test versus 15 or 20 tests, or do one incubator test versus 15 or 20, and then if you have an alert within those consolidated tests, you can then begin the test in those areas to see which one of those came up positive. But you're going to reduce those as we do in the lab over a course of time because you begin to understand your plant, you begin to understand the profile of bacteria, or the bacteria profile within your plant. So you can move from a very high-cost area the first month or two to gather the basics or the founding information to continue the risk analysis, and then look at some areas where PCR testing is very inexpensive. You can consolidate tests through PCR testing, or you do consolidation for, say, a Neogen system, for instance, which is a little bit more expensive. Or you could look at just changing the way in which you spread your samples around the plant and reduce those accordingly to where you're finding reactions. It takes anywhere from 12 to 36 hours to get a result through a culture test. And that's fine for environmental testing because you have 3 to 5 to 7 days, maybe longer, to stop something. But I kind of like the PCR method myself because you can get a result within an hour and take care of it that same day rather than allowing Listeria, which is a high-growth, very fast-growth pathogen, to continue contaminating your plant until you have a good result. And a PCR test is one in which is simple to do. It can be done without incubation, and you have your results and you can move on.
Well, Dr. Kolb, there is a big issue amongst some academicians that hold that what they really want is a quantitative test which counts the number of organisms so that you know that sanitation measures are reducing the number of organisms versus the other alternative, which is a qualitative test. You just want to know if it's there or not. Which one do you prefer?
I prefer a qualitative test. You know, when it comes to environmental testing, I don't think we need quantitative as much as we need qualitative. We want to know if it's there or not, because if it is there, if it's growing exponentially within a few days, my apologies, exponentially within a couple of days, it's going to grow to a sizable number anyway. So I believe just knowing it's there and discovering it and do something about it is the most important thing. And you know, you can find some very inexpensive PCR assays that will do that for you, and within a day you can find out where it is and remove it. Now, there's also the ATP system, which Neogen has a great ATP system which looks for what protein is left. Simply put, protein is left on the surface of the equipment after it's cleaned, and that will tell you in units whether or not your surface is clean, free of dirt, protein, organic matter, whatever the case may be, whatever bacteria will live on. And if it's not on the surface of the equipment, it's not going to live. But you can't do an ATP test on drains. You can't do an ATP test on floors. And that's where you find a lot of bacteria, such as Listeria. But if you use that after the cleaning cycle, it does tell you one of the most important elements of your sanitation program, that is, are they cleaning properly? And cleaning properly means that they go through a pattern, programmed manner to clean each piece of equipment correctly every night. using the right amount of chemicals, using the right amount of cleaning implements and procedures to say this is clean or this is not clean, and then doing the ATP test and saying, well, what do you know, this is actually a clean surface. And that's relative to the type of plant, it's relative to the age of the equipment. But you can get even very, very old equipment to come very clean. It takes a little longer, and sometimes it's a little harder, but it can come clean, and you can prove it through an ATP test. And then when you look at what you do in the way of drains and floors and walls and the plastic drapes and coolers and things, roll that into the combination, test it all. It's very simple over the course of a few days to say, here I have an area. I need to focus here. My risk analysis tells me I shouldn't have E. coli in this traffic way. Do I need foot dips? Do I need rubber boots? Do I need to do something to stop the influx of this pathogen into my plant?
Excellent analysis. Let me see if I can summarize for the audience. So in the event that an environmental test is alerted, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, then a sanitation or a disinfection process is then engaged, and then another test to make sure that the organism has been completely cleaned. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. You need to have a consistent cycle, a system. And it starts with building small building blocks at the sanitation level, having the right chemicals, having the right training, having the right cleaning procedures, having the right testing for that. On the environmental level, looking down with high resolution to things like drains, areas that the sanitation crew can't reach. I mean, I have too many examples of where we pulled a cover from a chain off and found just years and years of built up filth inside these covers because sanitation couldn't get to them. And then, of course, it takes the ability to management to analyze this information. And analysis is intuitive sometimes with environmental testing because you're chasing something. You may stop it here and find it somewhere else. And so you're trying to get ahead of this bug because you don't want it in the plant at all.
Well, Dr. Kolb, your analysis is right on point with several major contamination events which have followed the following sequence. The government agency, and I'm thinking of one in Canada, took a sample of some lettuce from a grocery store, found Listeria, went back to the plant, tested several products, finished product in process, raw product, couldn't find any Listeria. Then they did an environmental test on several areas, and guess what? Came up with a positive test.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that is a typical type of scenario for most recalls?
I'd say it's very typical. If you have a pathogen or bacteria in the plant, it's going to find its way to the food. Food is protein. The bacteria has everything it needs there. It knows where to look. It's much like a cat going after food or a dog going after a bone. It's going to look for those areas where there's a target of opportunity, the lettuce, the meat, the fish, the poultry, and that's where it's going to go. And you can't keep it away. What you have to do is keep it out of your plant. Build a good line of defense and make sure that line of defense, your sanitation program, your good hygiene program, other programs are doing what they should be doing. A good example is this Birch Farms that just recently had the cantaloupe or honeydew, that is, recall. He had no third-party food safety certification, so we don't know what kind of program he had. But even the certification has its weaknesses because I'll bet you I've been on 400, 500, 600, maybe 1,000 different audits over the years. I've yet to find an inspector who really understands an environmental program. But they do look and see if all the prerequisite programs are there, and that's important because a good auditor will come in and tell you and give you a baseline, that is, of where you're at, and then from there you can work and begin to develop your program into something that has integrity, something that's robust. I get very sad when I hear people say, we just passed. Okay, well, let's not stop. Let's keep going. Oh, no, we're there. Let's focus on something else. We'll worry about this next year. You can't do that with a good GFSI program. You shouldn't be able to do that with a good GFSI program because that next year the auditor can look back and say, hey, for 6 months you guys did nothing here. And he won't pass you. You won't be set up for a robust audit. And so you really need to have a third-party audit. This guy, I think if he had a third-party audit, probably would have discovered some missing areas. And, packing plants traditionally, whether it's Jensen Farms or Birch Farms or any other packing plant in the United States, generally don't believe they have a problem because they're outside. But they do. They're just like a plant on the inside. Bacteria forms in places where we don't clean. It forms in high traffic areas. It looks for a target of opportunity, a cantaloupe, honeydew, lettuce, oranges, whatever the case may be, and it goes for it. And we got to know that. We got to know how it moves, where it moves, so we can stop it dead in its tracks.
Well, Dr. Kolb, that's an excellent experiential reference to the nature of contamination events and how they do flower from environmental surfaces. Would you like to outline for us what essentially are the steps once a contamination event has occurred, and backtracking or source tracking to discover in a detective fashion the location of the potential environmental source?
Well, some people may disagree with me, and that's fine. An environmental contamination event where we find a pathogen, say, in a drain, or we find E. coli, say, on equipment, unless there's been direct contact with food, it doesn't necessarily determine or is not necessarily an indicator that we have a recall event. Of course, every situation is different. I think management needs to know this information so they can make that decision. But environmental testing, once you have set up your indicators and once you have begun to analyze your data, needs to be consolidated and refined into somewhat of a, I would say some sort of statistical processing algorithm, or just simply a bar chart to show the profile of the plant in terms of areas. Like you could set your drains up and compare drains from one month to the next. You could set floors up and compare floors from one month to the next, and begin to get an understanding of how that plant actually lives, how it breathes, how it functions based on its manufacturing profile. I'm not sure I've answered your question, but what you want to know should you find a positive alert is, what is this going to lead to? Is this a single event? Is this a multiple event? Is this an event that is in one area? Or is it an event that's in many areas of the plant at the same time or at different times? You can track the flow of bacteria through a plant sometimes environmentally from one day to the next. I've been in a number of plants where they've had Listeria issues, and Listeria issues don't go away. They come back, they come back, they come back, and they take a very strict cleaning regimentation over a period of 3 weeks to completely remove it. But if you have old drains, if you got drains you can't flush or get in and clean well, you'll find that you always will have a Listeria issue. And so there you need to set up some very serious Listeria alerts around these places, so you can begin to say, okay, I've got a serious alert here. Now, what do I need to do about it? And that's something you need to take to management and say, I've got a high traffic area. I've got an indication over the last day or two that we have Listeria very seriously in this issue that we can't do anything about. And then get management involved to say, okay, put this area off limits. Go through a very strict 3-week cleaning regimentation. And for Listeria, it is a very strict regimentation of alternating your sanitizing chemicals over 3 weeks and using clean brushes every 3 weeks so that you don't move contamination from 1 week to the next or one area to the next with the same brush. But taking this information and trying to make something of it, and then determining based on the kind of pathogen you're looking for, can we expect this to happen again? Or is this a one-time event? Where do we record this so that this time next year or this time next month we haven't forgotten what we found, and if we find it again maybe somewhere else, and can we connect the dots? I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Dr. Kolb, I have an email question from a manager in Colorado, and he's asking whether or not it's a recommended procedure to use a high-pressure wash for sanitation inside a food processing plant.
I personally don't like high-pressure washes, and the reason for that is for two reasons. One is the area that's actually directly in contact with the high-pressure wash, say the size of a silver dollar, is the only piece of the area that's truly cleaned, whether it's a hot or cold high-pressure wash. As you move that wand around, it's kind of like moving a flashlight around in a dark room. You only hit certain places on the wall with the flashlight. Everything else is mist. You don't know what's there. And that's what happens with a high-pressure washer. The second thing is a high-pressure washer just splashes filth and dirt and bacteria all around it that you can't clean very well. I don't like them. I think they're a shortcut we don't need to take. They're good for cleaning vehicles, the mud off of vehicles. They're good for cleaning the mud off of a floor where you've got maybe trucks driving in the drop-off product, but not in terms of a true sanitation procedure. I'd rather see people with brushes, and I know it's expensive, and I know it's not very cost-effective, but having produced and formulated a number of chemicals myself, I can tell you that there isn't a single chemical in the world, no matter what salesman tells you what, that just goes on and comes off and removes dirt. They have to go on, they have to be scrubbed, they have to be rinsed, they have to be checked, and then rinsed again, and then you might have a clean surface, but only after you've done an ATP test. So I hope that answers the gentleman's question.
Yes, very good. I have another email question from a food safety officer in California. Do you have an opinion on in-house labs versus third-party labs for environmental tests?
You can use either lab. You can use an external culture lab, or you can use an internal lab. I think for cost benefit, the internal lab has many more advantages. Plus, they don't have to be certified. And most of the in-house labs for environmental testing do not use live bacteria. So you don't have the fear of cross-contaminating from your incubators or your 3M kit or whatever the case may be of contaminating product or people. It's all dead bacteria they use, and there's no chance of it regrowing, so to speak. I like an in-house lab. The results are quick. They're cheaper, more efficient, and I think it's the way to go. But honestly, since you don't have to certify environmental testing or environmental labs, I think that in-house is the way to go. Although culture testing externally is good too.
Excellent. Dr. Kolb, here's an emailed question from a food sanitation officer in Washington, the state of. What are chemical rotation regimes that you suggest for sanitation?
For the most part, the only time you need to change chemicals, I think, is when you run across Listeria. E. coli and Salmonella and most other pathogens are easily removed in one or two cleanings. And for a normal cleaning, you want to rinse the surface first. You want to look to see if there's any particular areas that need some individual cleaning where scale has been built up, and then, of course, use a good degreaser or a good foamer, scrubbing that into the surface, removing it with another rinse, then putting on a disinfectant such as a quaternary or, say, chlorine. Some people like chlorine as a sanitizer. And then rinsing again, perhaps. This is a normal routine, works very well. But for Listeria, if you have Listeria in your drains or on the floor, it really takes a lot of work. And it's a 3-week routine, and 3 weeks sounds like a lot. But normally when you develop Listeria, it's been there for a long time, you just haven't found it. And so it's deeply rooted in your plant somewhere. And the routine runs usually the first week using chlorine, the second week using something like citric acid, and then the third week using a quaternary to scrub the area, clean it very well from week to week to week, and getting new clean brushes with each week so you're not transferring the bacteria from one week to another.
Outstanding suggestions. Here's a food quality manager in Arizona. Why is there a preference for stainless steel on food contact surfaces?
The stainless steel has long been used in the hospitals, in the hospital industry, in the food industry, in many industries because it is very, very durable. In other words, it is a very hard material. It stands up against chemicals. It stands up against wear and tear much better than, say, Teflon or plastic or galvanized or say even some of the plastic used in conveyor belts. It's very preferred, and it's very easy to clean.
Very good, Dr. Kolb. I think I've expended all of the time that we've allotted for tonight's interview. I'd like to allow you some time for closing remarks.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm a firm believer in environmental testing, and I think that it's a piece of the pie that's missing in many, many plants. You can't get away with 1 or 2 a week. You really need to set up a good program that's consistent, that's dynamic, that's robust in terms of it moves throughout the program. In other words, you're changing your testing locations. You're looking for all types of bacteria. And it's based on risk. Where are your high traffic areas? Where does the commodity come in? Where don't you clean as well as you think you should clean? And I think if done right, I think if it's done right, an environmental program will be a very good precursor to a contamination event and allow you the ability to fix something before it becomes an embarrassment to you. It's costly, it hurts people, and certainly ruins your reputation in the industry. I believe in these programs as much as I believe in PCR and the high confidence levels that can be attained on finished product testing with PCR.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kolb, for your time and your excellent recommendations to food production, food quality, food safety, and food security managers. And I'd like to wish you a good evening.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an honor to be on the show again, and I hope my comments are of value to your audience.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Bye now.